October 12, 1954, the Macambo nightclub on Sunset Boulevard. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, expensive perfume, and the low hum of 1,000 desperate secrets. A young waiter, his hands trembling slightly, approaches a corner booth draped in shadow. Inside sit three men in dark, impeccably tailored suits. They don't laugh, they don't talk, they just watch. The waiter is 22, he's new, he doesn't know the rules yet. He leans in to pour a glass of bourbon for the man in the center, a man with eyes like cold marble. They called him Jackie, the enforcer. The liquid splashes, just a drop, a tiny amber betrayal on the white tablecloth. The room doesn't go silent yet. The orchestra plays on, but at that table, the world stops. Jackie's hand moves faster than a camera shutter. The crack of palm against cheek isn't loud, but it's a sound that carries. It carries through the clinking glasses, through the swing music, straight to a booth 4 tables away, where Dean Martin sits, alone. A cigarette smolders between his fingers. A half-finished whiskey sits before him. He watches the waiter stumble back, a red handprint blooming on his pale face. He watches Jackie settle back into the shadows as if he's just swatted a fly. And in that moment, in the dim, smoky light, Dean makes a decision that would be whispered about in backrooms from Vegas to Chicago for decades. A decision Hollywood would spend a fortune to make you forget. This isn't a story about a slap. This is a story about a debt. A secret ledger written in blood and fear, opened on a night when a singer decided to stop pretending. The question is, why? Why would Dean Martin, at the peak of his fame, risk everything for a stranger? To understand that night, you have to rewind the film. You have to go back to the beginning, before the legend, before the Rat Pack, before the world knew his name. Steubenville, Ohio, 1917. The air didn't smell of perfume there. It smelled of steel mills and coal dust. Dino Paul Crosty grew up in that soot, the son of an immigrant barber, in a neighborhood where you learn the facts of life with your fists. The language of his youth wasn't English or Italian first, it was the language of the street. You kept your head down, you protected your own. You understood that power didn't always wear a badge, sometimes it wore a very nice suit. This was the clay that shaped him, not the glitter of Hollywood, but the grit of a town that offered 2 choices, work in the mill or find a way to sing your way out. And sing he did, a voice like smooth amber, a smile that promised a shared joke with every note. He climbed out of the steel country haze and into the smoky chaos of nightclubs, first in Cleveland, then everywhere. The war came. He served, but not in the way you'd think. He was stationed in the U.S., entertaining troops. And it was here, in the chaotic, money-flushed world of stateside bases and the clubs that thrived around them, that Dean had his first real, terrifying introduction to a different kind of organization. A syndicate. They ran the entertainment. They owned the jukeboxes. They protected the performers. You wanted to work, you paid your dues. Literally, young Dean, with his hungry eyes and velvet voice, learned the unspoken rules. He saw what happened to comics who told the wrong joke about the wrong man. He saw singers disappear from lineups because they borrowed money from the wrong friend. He learned to smile wider when they were in the room. He learned to make them laugh. It was a survival skill, and he filed it all away. Then came Los Angeles, the blinding, beautiful lie of it all. The early 50s, Dean was a star but a lonely one. His marriage was crumbling. His first solo ventures had sputtered. He was just another handsome voice in a town full of them, until he met the force of nature that was Jerry Lewis. The partnership was atomic, Martin and Lewis. It wasn't just success, it was a cultural earthquake. They owned the world. But behind the slapstick and the songs, behind the record-breaking box office numbers, a sickness was growing. For Dean, the sheer, exhausting, dehumanizing grind of the act. Jerry was a genius, a tornado of chaos. Dean was the straight man, the crooner, the foil. The studio, the press, even the public saw him increasingly as just the handsome one, the singer, the sidekick. The resentment began as a quiet drip in the back of his mind, a poison. And in the shadows, watching this billion-dollar machine with cold, calculative eyes, were the men from the old world. The men who understood that where there is immense profit, there is a need for management. The studios had their own agreements, their own silent partners. But the nightclubs, the casinos where Dean and Jerry performed their live shows, the private parties for wealthy investors, that was different territory. That belonged to the outfit. And Dean, the kid from Steubenville, knew them when they walked in. He knew the particular cut of their suits. He knew the way they held a room without saying a word. He'd laugh with them at the Copa. He'd take a private meeting after a show in Vegas. They were friends, good friends. They helped with problems. A gambling debt wiped clean. A threatening columnist suddenly becoming complimentary. A rival for a role finding himself otherwise engaged. The favors were never asked for outright. They were offered. And in their world, an offered favor was a debt incurred. Dean's ledger was filling up, and he knew with a cold certainty that sat behind his smiling eyes that one day the bill would come due. The tension with Jerry became unbearable. The laughter on set was hollow, a recording played on a loop. Dean would finish a grueling 18-hour shoot, his head pounding, his soul feeling thin and worn, and he'd retreat to the steam room of the gym. Not to sweat out the exhaustion, but to meet, to talk, to listen. The men in the towels next to him didn't want autographs. They wanted assurances. They had investments. They had points in future films. They needed the Martin and Lewis machine to keep printing money. Dean was the amenable one, the reasonable one. Jerry was the unpredictable asset. The pressure mounted from every direction. The studio demanding more, Jerry demanding more, and these silent partners, expecting a return on their implicit investment. The breaking point, the famous split in 1956, was portrayed as a clash of egos, and it was. But it was also in the Underworld ledger a breach of contract, a threat to revenue streams. Dean had allies in that split, powerful, quiet allies who ensured the studios didn't blackball him, who made sure his solo career had a runway. But the cost was a deeper entanglement. His freedom from Jerry came with heavier, invisible chains. By the time we arrive at that night in 1954, Dean is a man living in a gilded cage of his own making. He is spectacularly famous. He is financially set, and he is owned. He knows it every time he looks in the mirror. The smile is still there, the charm is effortless, but the eyes, if you knew what to look for, you saw a man watching the clock, waiting for the hour of collection. So picture him there at the Macambo. He's between films. The split with Jerry is still 2 years away, but the fissures are canyons. He's drinking more. The whiskey isn't for fun anymore, it's a marinade. He's sitting alone because sometimes the crowd is the loneliest place of all. And then he hears it, that slap. He sees the kid, the waiter, so young, so publicly humiliated, holding his face, tears of shame and pain in his eyes, rooted to the spot. And he sees Jackie, smiling. A small, cruel smile. It's a display of power, casual and absolute. A reminder to everyone in the room, we are here. We are the real royalty. And something in Dean Martin snaps. Not loudly, not with a shout, but with a silent, seismic shift. In that moment, the waiter isn't a stranger. He's every version of Dean that ever was. The young Dino Crosty from Steubenville, the hungry singer in Cleveland, the man who had to smile while his dignity was quietly stripped away. The ledger in his mind flips open. He sees a lifetime of silent payments, of compromised smiles, of debts he never asked for, and he decides, tonight he is paying one off. He stubs out his cigarette. He stands up. The room hasn't fully registered the slap yet, but they register this. Dean Martin, rising from his booth, he doesn't look angry, he looks serene, a terrifying calm. He walks not to Jackie's table, but to the center of the dance floor. The orchestra leader, sensing a star's whim, trails off. A spotlight, metaphorical if not literal, finds him. The room falls silent. Every eye is on Dean. He turns. He looks directly at Jackie, the enforcer in his shadowy booth. He smiles, that famous, easy Dean Martin smile. And then he speaks. His voice, that iconic baritone, doesn't boom. It wraps around the silence, intimate and deadly clear. Jackie, he says, as if greeting an old friend, you've got a hell of a right hand, I just saw it. A nervous titter runs through the crowd. Is this a joke? Is Dean going to make light of it? Jackie's cruel smile widens slightly, thinking he's about to be praised by a star. Dean continues, his voice dropping just a notch, becoming conversational just for the two of them, even though the whole room is listening. Reminds me of a guy I knew back in Ohio. Big guy, liked to slap people around too, made him feel real big. The temperature in the room drops 20 degrees, the smile never leaves Dean's face. Then one night he slapped the wrong guy's kid brother, a quiet guy, a tailor. Dean pauses, lets the silence stretch. He takes a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes locked on Jackie's. They found that big guy the next morning, in an alley, his own hands. Well, let's just say he wasn't slapping anybody ever again. The tailor, he just went back to work, quiet fellow. The story hangs in the air. It's not a threat, It's a parable, a story told in a calm, almost nostalgic tone, but its meaning is a razor blade. I know what you are, I am from where you are from, and even tailors have brothers. Then Dean shifts. He turns his smile to the stunned, tearful waiter. He waves him over. The kid, terrified, shuffles forward. Dean puts a firm, kind hand on his shoulder. He looks back at Jackie. "This kid," Dean says, his voice now warm, paternal, "he's going to get me a fresh bottle of your best bourbon, Jackie, and you're going to pay for it, for the whole table. And then you're going to apologize to him, not because I'm asking you to, but because it's the right thing to do. And we're all gentlemen here, aren't we?" The air is electric, impossible. No one talked to Jackie like this. No one. Jackie's face is a stone mask, but his knuckles are white on the tablecloth. He is in an impossible bind. In front of all of Hollywood in his own kingdom of fear, he is being publicly schooled. He could have Dean killed, of course. He could have him buried in the desert, but not here, not now, and Dean knows this. He has calculated the entire theater of it. He has used his fame, his stature, as a shield in this one brilliantly defiant moment. To refuse would be to look weak, to be bested by a crooner in front of everyone. To comply is humiliation. The silence lasts for a lifetime. Then Jackie gives a single, barely perceptible nod to his lieutenant. A wallet is produced. Money is placed on the table. Jackie looks at the waiter, his eyes dead. "Sorry, kid," he mutters, the words like broken glass. Dean's smile becomes genuine. He claps the waiter on the back. "See, all good." He turns and walks back to his booth as the orchestra on cue leaps back into a frantic, joyful number. The spell is broken. The room erupts in nervous, exhilarated chatter. They've witnessed something, but most don't fully grasp what. They think they saw Dean Martin stand up to a bully, a brave, charming moment. They didn't see the declaration of war. Because in the Underworld, the story that spread wasn't about the slap or the apology. It was about the code. Dean had broken the cardinal rule. He had publicly shamed a made man. He had used their own language, the parable of the tailor, a clear reference to a known grisly mob hit from the Midwest, to do it. He had shown that he wasn't afraid, or more accurately, that he was so tired of being afraid that he'd chosen a different kind of danger. In the backrooms, the legend grew. They called it Martin's Stand. Some enforcers, the old-school ones, secretly admired it. It took asterisk cojones. Others saw it as the ultimate betrayal. The ledger was now stained in blood-red ink. The fallout was silent, cold, and professional. There was no dramatic confrontation, no horse's head in his bed. That was for amateurs. The retaliation was economic. A planned investment in a new Las Vegas casino that Dean was fronting gone, vanished overnight. A sudden, inexplicable audit by the IRS on his production company, a script he was desperate for, a dramatic role to change his image, suddenly finding its funding pulled. The message was clear: we made you. We can unmake you. Your shield of fame is only as strong as we allow it to be. And Dean understood. The brief flame of defiance was snuffed out by the cold reality of the machine. He withdrew. The drinking, which was a companion, became a crutch, then a cage. The Dean Martin persona, the lovable, tipsy, carefree crooner, was perfected. It became his armor, his bunker. He leaned into it so hard that the world believed it. They saw a man who didn't care, who just wanted to have fun. They never saw the man who cared so deeply he almost got himself killed for a waiter he didn't know. They never saw the prisoner inside the caricature. Years later, long after the storms had passed, long after those specific men had faded into history or prison or grave, someone close to him, a bodyguard who'd been there that night and for decades after, finally broke his silence in a taped interview meant for a private archive. The man was old, his voice a gravelly whisper. He was asked about the Macambo incident. He confirmed it in grim detail. And then he said something that changes everything. He said that the next morning, in his dressing room at the studio, Dean was ashen. He wasn't hungover, he was terrified. He looked at his reflection and muttered, almost to himself, "Well, Dino, you finally said it. Hope it was worth the price." And then he laughed. A hollow, empty sound. The bodyguard said he'd never heard a laugh so full of regret. The price was a piece of his soul. The price was living the rest of his life in the happiest prison ever built. He played the fool so perfectly that the world was fooled. He became the king of cool by deciding that nothing mattered enough to be uncool about. But it was a performance, his greatest performance. And it started the morning after he chose to be a man for just 1 minute in a room full of monsters. Hollywood buried the truth because it was bad for business. It exposed the rot behind the marquee lights, the delicate, toxic symbiosis between the dream factory and the underworld. They let the legend of drunk, happy Dean stand because it was safe. It was marketable. It erased the complexity, the bravery, the devastating cost of that single, defiant moment. So the next time you see an old clip of Dean Martin swaying with a drink in his hand, that glazed, smiling look in his eyes, look closer. Behind that smile is a man remembering a slap in a crowded room. Behind those eyes is the ghost of a kid from Steubenville who remembered who he was just for one night and paid for it for the rest of his life. He became a legend in the underworld for his response, and a ghost in his own life because of it. This is the Hollywood they don't frame in the lobby cards. This is the cost of a moment's courage in a town built on compromise. If you're still listening, if you believe that the real stories are the ones whispered after the lights go down, then you understand what we do here. This isn't just nostalgia. It's an excavation. We're digging for the truth they paved over to build the legend. At Hollywood Untold Files, we follow those whispers into the dark, because some men aren't just stars. They're silent witnesses, and Dean Martin's silence was the loudest sound he ever made. Share this with someone who thinks they know the old Hollywood. Subscribe and join us in the shadows where the real stories hide. The story is never just the song, it's the silence that comes after.